Hello everybody and welcome back to the Grim Dawn Newcomer's Guide. This episode is going to focus on one of the most difficult nemesis bosses in the entire list, and at the risk of having everyone turn off the video right now, I'm going to spoiler alert. I do not kill this boss. It'll be clear why once we get to that point in the video, and the explanation will obviously make it even more clear. But suffice it to say, it's basically unstoppable force versus immovable object situation, so my apologies if that disappoints you, but there we are. At least I let you know early, right? As always, though, it's a YouTube video, so menace that like button with a poke, drop some endless comments down below, and subscribe your heart out. There is some simple stuff about Kubacabra that makes the boss fight enticing, so let's start with that. Since Kuba is the beast nemesis, there are literally tons of enemies all over the entire world of this type, so we can build that infamy bar up really, really fast. And that's it. That's where the good news stops. You get 2 whole sentences of good news, and now we get to the bad news. You're welcome. Let's start with Kuba's spawn locations. If you're looking on the wiki, or you're looking on Grim Tools for these locations, you might take a look at the list and think, wow, that's only 5 locations. That won't take any time at all. And that is where you'd be wrong. 3 of these 5 locations are locked behind the Ancient Grove key dungeon, so right off the bat you can tell more than half of these places are going to be an absolute pain to explore. If you're sticking to the tried and true method of doing the key dungeons last, you may be thinking, well, that's not so bad. At least there is only 2 locations I have to check before that. And to that I would say, oh my, you sweet summer child. The 2 locations we have to check off of our list prior to going into the key dungeon are Gloomwald and Ogdenbog. And if that doesn't frighten you immediately, let me tell you that these locations are absolutely ungodly large. The sheer size of Ogdenbog alone is enough to take all the wind instantly out of your sails. You might be the type of person to say, though, this is fine. All these other places are only small because there are so many of them. Well, that is certainly a glass half full perspective, dear viewer, and I applaud that kind of thinking. My only counterpoint is the enemy encounters within the Ogdenbog and Gloomwald are some of the tankiest, most monotonous, and frustrating encounters in the entire 7-act game. The Yeti enemies alone, which share a physical likeness to our nemesis, can take 2 to 3 minutes to clear out a pack of them, depending on your build. Obviously, with my build, things take a little bit longer for me, and a lot of these enemies are resistant to my damage types, but the point still stands. Monsters in these locations are thick, angry, and some of them are very, very fast. None of that makes for a good time unless you can just skip past them with some decent movement abilities. But one bright side to this is that you can usually happen upon 2 or 3 monster shrines while you're searching these locations. Maybe even more, depending on how far you venture out and how thoroughly you check. So the fact that these shrines might not be loaded with the swampy little titans of terror makes them more enticing for sure. But really, once you get done exploring Gloomwald and then Ogdenbog with no luck, you'll simply need to make your way to the south side of Ogdenbog. Once you're there, you can just follow the wall up to the avatar of Muldrogan, and that's the entrance to the key dungeon. The key dungeons, as I'm sure you're aware by now, are super linear, and you only have to check 1 floor at a time. Not the most difficult thing to do on paper, but don't get trapped in dangerous key dungeon side missions that start funneling massive heroic enemies at you and lock the door until they're all dead. Not only is it mega stressful, but if you're dead, you don't get another chance at this nemesis and you'll need to restart the session. Then start at the top of the list all over again. Goes without saying that goes for every nemesis boss, but ugh. just ugh. Now, in this playthrough, I was unfortunate enough to find Kubi in the Tainted Wood of the key dungeon. This is the last floor before the key boss, so you can imagine I'm pretty sick to death of the entire experience. Then, I went on and read what this boss could do. I have killed it before on normal difficulty, and while it was time-consuming, it wasn't difficult, but it's normal, so it's not supposed to be difficult, especially if you've got levels up on them. All that being said, though, After reading what the boss can do, there are a lot of things to be worried about. First, there are the resistances, my absolute bane. Kuba has the normal nemesis options called the CC immunity and the health reduction resistances, but there are also insane amounts of cold and vitality resistances, which is my entire build. This is, I have a few acid-based abilities as well, but if I'm being honest, they aren't a huge part of what I was trying to accomplish with the build, so I don't focus on them very hard. Now let's move on to Kuba's abilities. The auto attack on this monster comes with 20 charge levels, and in those charges there is 40% crit damage, 200 offensive ability, and 60% attack speed. My nightmare. If that wasn't bad enough, the auto attack will spawn blood pools that live for 12 seconds and have all the qualities of a Wendigo totem, meaning that they deal bleeding damage, they reduce damage done, and then they reduce offensive ability as well. Add to that they also heal the friendly targets next to them, and you can see that you'll need to be constantly away from the little blood pools. That is almost impossible for a melee character like me while trying to lay down any meaningful damage. So the quick tip, if you're rocking a melee build, make sure you deal a lot of damage really fast and that you are hyper mobile if you are looking at Scooby-Doo. Kuba also fires medium-range projectiles that deal bleeding, vitality, and physical damage, and if these projectiles hit you, they are going to go on to give the boss 200% of the damage back in health. Did I mention this also spawns blood pools? Because this ability also spawns blood pools. Kuba also has a wave-type ability that will deal piercing and bleed damage while reducing your resistances, and lastly, a short-range ability that will slow you, bleed you, and reduce your health. Now, all of that being said, this is just more obnoxious abilities on top of more obnoxious abilities, but again, if you're playing melee, this boss is going to be very, very, very difficult. Even for ranged people, because some ranged players really don't have a whole lot of health to them, so I can imagine you get pretty easily one-tapped by this big boy. But anyway, Kuba also has a couple of passives that should really sell you on this fight. The first of which being that when the boss is hit, there is a 25% chance that your damage will be reduced by 33% and that you'll take bleeding damage. So every 1 in 4 hits on the boss has the potential to reduce your damage and hurt you. Fantastic. Finally, the pièce de résistance, the endless part of Kubacabra, the endless menace. Kuba will split into 2 smaller copies of itself once it's been slain. These copies have all the same abilities that the big one comes with, except there are now 2 of them. The smaller versions come with a 500,000 health 500,000 health loss, but when there's 2 million health nemesis bosses running at you, survival becomes the more prevalent notion, in my opinion. So when you kill the big one, you're going to split into 2 regular people-sized Kubacabras, and we're not even done yet. Did you know that when you kill the smaller versions of the big boss, that you get 2 even smaller versions after that? I know. These similar, smaller versions have 700,000 health, but there are literally 4 of them. All in all, this boss will run at you a total of 7 times before it actually dies. And let's not forget all the lifesteal and the blood pools that we have to put up with while dealing with the endless mitosis of Kubacabra. So no, I didn't kill it. I tried a ton of different angles, a bunch of different ointments and elixirs, but I could not accomplish it with this build. And the moral of the story is that not all of these bosses will be killable depending on your situation. If I were rocking different damage types and faster damage, I'd probably just have to be patient and wear it down, but after 45 minutes of this, plus all the searching I was doing beforehand, that's it. I'm okay. I'm out. You're not going to finish them all, but hey, if you're going for the 100% ender, make sure that you have a class that can make that damage happen, because my god, I just wanted to rip all of the hair out of my head that I don't actually have. So, there you go. Now on to the rewards for killing the smallest Kubas. You actually have to kill the, I think it's Kubacabra the Tenacious is the small one. But when you kill those, you have a chance to pick up the chosses, Kubacabra's chosses, or Kubacabra's leg guards. These are pants, and compared to the amount of work needed to kill this boss, I highly doubt that they're worth it. But the chosses will give you a 40 to 60 offensive ability, they'll give you pierce resistance, and then go on to give you +3 to deadly momentum, tenacity of the boar, lethal assault, or tectonic shift. And that is all baseline stuff, no stats included. So that's Soldier, Shaman, Nightblade, and Oathkeeper, if you need to know what those abilities go to, but, you know. Next up, the leg guards will do very similar things with the offensive ability, but they will instead provide you with elemental resistance, and then +3 to ignition, high impact, and inferno. But that is it, though, ladies and gents. The endless menace lives on forever in my psyche, taunting me with those big bloody horns and infinite health. But we'll be back tomorrow to talk about another super time-consuming boss called Musalwaki the Chillwind. No, the Chillwind. How do I mess up the second part of the name and not the first? Musalwaki feels like it would be the tough one to pronounce, you know? Anyway, I like the way it sounds. I like to call him Moose. He's a big guy. 2-stage boss, though, with a lot of bullet hell mechanics, and that, in and of itself, was a little bit frustrating to deal with, but, you know, sometimes you just gotta take the nemesis on the chin. But that is it for me, everybody. Feel free to stick around to the end of the video for the hyper sped up time-lapsed version of me getting insanely frustrated with this nemesis, and I will see you all tomorrow.